Okay. Good evening, everyone. And today I want to look at this topic in the Bible of contentment. And there are so many passages teaching this subject, and it's really something that must be important to God, and it is very clear, like how this is. What God expects of us, when it comes to contentment. So the first verse I want to let's look at Hebrews 13 verse 5. It says, let your conversation be without covetousness. Just give me a second. Okay, no problem. So let your conversation be without covetousness, and be content with such things as you have, for he has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. So the word conversation here is also manner of life and our lifestyle. So and also in NAS translation, it is translated as our character. So God wants our lifestyle, the way our daily way of living. We should have contentment, and this verse also tells us what is the opposite of contentment, and that is covetousness. So let's look at the meaning of this word. In Webster's, the word contentment is a noun, and it actually means a resting or satisfaction of mind without disquiet, restless, or unease, a silent submission. And the adjective means literally to be contained or to be held within limits. Hence, quiet, not disturbed, having a mind of peace, easy, satisfied, so as not to repine, object, or oppose. And the meaning of covetousness is a strong or inordinate or disorderly or excessive desires of obtaining and possessing some supposed good, usually in a bad sense. So quite a clear meaning in Webster's dictionary. And then in Strong's, this Greek word is archeo, and it comes from the word where you possess unfailing strength. To be possessed of unfailing strength would be one meaning. Also to be strong, then to suffice, to have enough, to defend, to be satisfied, to be content. And it's used and translated as content, sufficient, enough, suffice. So in Hebrews, Paul or whoever is the author is exhorting us to be content, and he's drawing from the lessons learned by the Exodus generation. We know most of the book of Hebrews is warnings and also lessons learned by the mistakes that were done by the Exodus generation. So we learn this, that it is possible that after we know God and after we have experienced his blessing, just like the nation of Israel, we could fall into this sin. And Israel, at least most of the people in the Exodus generation, were guilty of this sin. We read in Numbers 21 verse 4, then they set out from Mount Hor by the way of Red Sea to go around the land of Edom, and the people became impatient because of the journey. And the people spoke against God and Moses. Why have you brought us up out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there is no food and no water, and we loathe this miserable food. So it was not that they did not have anything. It's kind of contradictory, because first they say there is no food, and then they say that, okay, by the way, we do have some food, but we just loathe this. And um, the word miserable is translated light, I think, in King James. So it's probably not what they were expecting, or how they thought God's provisions should have been. So it was not like God had not provided for them, but it was not what they expected. And it was it was very sad in the sense the way they behaved, because let's imagine, we invite someone for a meal, and we do our best to to be good to them and hospitable to them, and their reaction is, we loathe, and we we just this food is miserable, something like that. So it was kind of a very, very bad behavior. And but this sin was not taken lightly by God. And we see that many in Israel died by snake bites. So this was one of the major sins of the nation of Israel. And I think it was one of the reasons they did not, of course, enter the promised land, most of them. So how does covetousness arise? It arises from our heart, as Jesus said in Mark 7, verse 21. It says, from within, out of the heart of men, proceed the evil thoughts, fornication, thefts, murders, adulteries, deeds of coveting and wickedness, as well as deceit, sensuality, evil, slander, pride, and foolishness. All these things proceed from within the man. So we see here covetousness, this excessive greed, comes from our thinking. And then, of course, it can manifest as in this passage itself, we can steal, we can commit murder, we can commit adultery. I mean, it's all connected, I feel. And also we notice that this is mentioned in, with a list of some very, very serious sins, which will surely keep us out of the kingdom. So we should examine our heart and make sure that these thoughts of covetousness don't manifest. So what are the things that we covet? We think we covet for things and possessions. In Luke 12, verse 15, he said to them, take heed and beware of covetousness. For a man's life consists not in the abundance of things which he possesses. So we think that our life can become better, can improve, or it can have more conveniences, security for future. And in order to kind of make our life easy in one way and secure, we can fall into this sin of coveting things and possessions. And there is a good example in Joshua 7. This was after the first successful conquest. Achan fell into this sin. It says, when I saw among the spoils a goodly Babylonish garment and 200 shekels of silver and a wedge of gold of 50 shekels weight, then I coveted them. So it starts with the eyes. We see things that attracts us, and we think that this can bring us some safety or pleasure in the future. So it starts from the eyes, and then we start, coveting it. And then he went ahead and actually stole those things which he was not supposed to, and took them. And behold, they are hid in the earth in the midst of my tent, and the silver under it. So again, this sin was extremely serious. We know that he and all his family had to die because of this act. Now let's look at how this word contentment is translated in other places in the New Testament. In Matthew 25 verse 9, but the wise answered, saying, not so, lest there be not enough for us and you, but go ye rather to them that sell and buy for yourselves. So here the word is translated enough, and it is a state of mind of, we knowing that, okay, I have enough. And as in this case, the wise virgins, they had enough, and they could not give to the foolish virgins, because then they would not be ready for the second coming. So it is a state of mind. And when we are satisfied, knowing that we have what we need, then it is translated as sufficient in John chapter 6 verse 7. Philip answered him, 200 penny worth of bread is not sufficient for them, that every one of them may take a little. So these words, I think, bring good understanding to contentment, enough and sufficient. And do we feel that way? That is the question that we can ask ourselves. If I ask myself, what will it take me to be satisfied? What would be the answer? Would it be like I need some little more things? If I have this little more security, or a little more only then I'll be satisfied? Or can I say that, I am content right now with the provision that God has for me now, right now? And I think our answer should be the second. Though yes, we should, of course, have desires, and we have our prayer requests. But at the same time, when God is not answering, or things are not coming through, we can show contentment, and we can show satisfaction in what God has provided for us. And our answer should be, I am content. I am happy with what God has provided for me. And God has been generous to me, right? Instead of saying, no, God needs to give me something more, I could say that God has been very generous and giving. Then when we have contentment, it will show in our lifestyle. And in Luke chapter 3, this is a passage when people were coming to John the Baptist to be baptized. And we see that here John replies to them, basically telling them to live a contented life. And when they do that, it will manifest in the actions. So in verse 10, and the people asked him, saying, what shall we do then, basically to be baptized? He answered and said unto them, he that has 2 coats, let him impart to him that has none. And he that has meat or food, let him do likewise. So someone who's content would be able to give to other people. So giving is evidence or fruit of contentment. Then came also publicans, that those are the tax collectors, to be baptized, and said unto him, Master, what shall we do? And he said unto them, exact no more than that which is appointed to you. So here we see the tax collectors, of course, they would add to the tax that the government actually was requiring them to give. they would add their own cut. So he's telling the tax collectors not to cheat, to be honest with the people. And that would only happen if they were content with what their wages was. So that is what he would say to the soldiers in the next verse. And he said unto them, in verse 14, and the soldiers likewise demanded of him, saying, what shall we do? And he said to them, do violence to no man, neither accuse any falsely, and be content with your wages. So he told the soldiers also not to be corrupt, basically, not to misuse their power, and if they are content with their wages, then they would not be, taking bribes and things from the people. So these are the good, way of examining ourselves. Like, are we doing this? Are we content with our wages? Of course, it's not wrong to, look for better employment and things like that. But is that discontentment and dissatisfaction making me become dishonest and corrupt? So of course that should not happen. We can go about trying to increase our wages in the right way. Then in Philippians chapter 4 verses 5 to 7, I think these are the inward attitudes and behaviors that we will show if we have contentment. In verse 5, it says, let your moderation or patience be known unto all men. The Lord is at hand. The Lord is at hand is like in Hebrews 13, where he will never leave you and he will never forsake you. That's the reason we can show contentment. Then verse 6, be careful for nothing or anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God. So these will be the fruit of contentment. We will not be anxious, but we will be making our requests to known to God and submitting to his will and being thankful for what he has given us and for his provisions. Then verse 7, and the peace of God. So that this is another fruit that we will have. We will have the peace of God, which passes all understanding, shall keep your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. So, what do we exactly need to say that we have enough and that is sufficient? I think 1 Timothy chapter 6 verse 8 is a good kind of marker or something that we can compare with. In in 1 Timothy 6 verse 8, it says, if we have food and covering, with these we shall be content. And we know that this whole passage, we will read this again, but Paul was kind of saying, this is how he lives a contented life. And Paul was a master in this actually. And he even said that in Philippians. We'll read that verse later. And he says that if we have food and covering, these two things, that's it. And this should be good enough for us to say that we have enough and we have sufficient and God's provision is good. And this is what Jesus prayed, give us this day our daily bread. But of course we know that, and most people that we know, we have much more than this. We can just keep counting our blessings. We have more than this. So God has been very generous to us. And There might be times when we would not have much, uh, and in those cases also we can live content, because anything more than food and covering is a bonus, is a blessing. Then in 2 Corinthians 12 verse 9, we learn that it is not always easy to be content, because it is a difficult, because our heart naturally, it naturally desires, more of these things. It is not easy, and it is especially not easy when we are in some kind of infirmity or sickness. Uh, but we have a provision, and that is the grace of God. In verse 9, he said unto me, my grace is sufficient for thee. So this is Paul speaking, of course. And he's praying to God because he is in some very bad situation, which he calls thorn in his flesh. He prayed to God to relieve him of that, but God did not. And God said that you just need my grace, and that is enough. For my strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, will I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest on me. So when we are in those situations, God gives us his grace, and that is his power, to be content. So it is not always easy, but God will give us his grace to to be content in all situations. I missed one slide, but the passage that I spoke about, how Paul learned to be content, is in Philippians 4, verses 11 to 13. The slide is not there, but I will read it from my notes. In Philippians 4, verse 11, not that I speak from want, for I have learned to be content. So Paul had to learn this. It did not come to him naturally. He, through the grace of God, became a master in this character. Verse 12, I know how to get along with humble means, and I also know how to live in prosperity. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of being filled and going hungry, both of having abundance and suffering need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. So Paul did not panic or became, covetous or behaved like the nation of Israel when things were not going his way. And it's also the other side. Also, when he had abundance, he did not forget God, or he did not become proud. He knew also how to behave in that situation. So he had become a master in this character, and we can also learn from him. And one thing we learn from this is that he treated both having plenty and having less both the same. So that that is how also we can learn how to be content. So being content is profitable. It is something that gives God extreme pleasure, and of course we will be rewarded as good servants in the coming kingdom. So this is a big passage, and it teaches us a lot about this character. In 1 Timothy 6, verse 6, but godliness with contentment is great gain. So great gain, it's very profitable. And verse 7 is very important. it kind of gives us the real picture, the spiritual reason for this. For we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we carry nothing out. This is such a important verse, when it comes to this teaching. And basically, it's like, in one way, why even bother, right? Because we are not going to take anything out of this world. There, so why worry so much, in one way? And of course, we did not bring anything into this world. So the world or God, in one way, don't own us anything. Everything, one way, is a gift. And so, yeah, so this is a very important verse. And then verse 8, we already read this. So if we have food and raiment, that's good enough to be content. Verse 9, but they that will be rich, so they are not happy just with food and raiment, right? So they are discontent, and they want to have possessions. Fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men into destruction and perdition. Now, when I read this verse, like Paul, I feel, is going to an extreme length of trying to warn us not to go in this direction, because as Christians, especially, we will destroy our faith and fall into all kinds of trouble. Then verse 10, for the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some coveted after, they have erred from the faith and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. Paul probably is thinking about some of his friends, some of his Christian fellows, here, who left the faith and were deceived by covetousness. Verse 11, but thou, man of God, flee these things, pursue after righteousness, godliness, faith, love, patience, meekness. So these are the things which will not be taken away from us when we leave this world. These things will follow us to the judgment seat. So in closing, I really love how Jesus explained this whole thing, of how we can be content. In Matthew 6, he says, therefore take no thought, saying, what shall we eat? What shall we drink? Or wherewith shall we be clothed? So Jesus is saying, don't even worry about these things. For after these things do the Gentiles seek. For your heavenly Father knows that you have need of all these things. So the Father knows what you need. And this is faith, right? This is faith. When we trust our Father, that He will provide for us and take care of our needs in this life. And we also see this, if we have children and people who are dependent on us, we see this behavior many times in them, that they are not so bothered. The kids are not so bothered how their parents are going to manage the food and things like that. They just know that lunch is going to be ready, dinner is going to be ready. So, and of course, in this passage, Jesus also gave the example of, look at the lilies, look at how God clothed them. And Jesus was showing what great faith is like, what trust is like, when he said this, that your Father knows that you have need of these things. So, so that's all I have for the teaching. If yeah, we can open it up for discussions or comments on the subject. Yes, Dean.
Yeah, really good teaching. Reminds me of that. When I was out as a Christian ambassador, most of the time, every day, especially when I was alone in Southern Ohio, I had to trust God for my daily meals and the place to sleep at night. When I came back home and I settled down with a job and stuff like this, and now I have a house which is actually more than I need, you know, you kind of settle in with the way most of society lives. Not totally, because, I still never want to lose my connection with God and my walk with God and his son. But it's not like those days when I had nothing and I had to depend on him every day for food to eat and a place to sleep. Many days like that. I remember one day, there was only one day, the only thing I had to drink, nothing to eat, was 1 cup of coffee. I remember that. But other than that, God always met my needs. I didn't have a car. My car, when I went to Southern Ohio the last time, I couldn't keep up the payments on my car when I left my job in Toledo. And I blew a rod in the car. It was a 72 Toyota Celica. And from there on, I had to just walk. That's just what I had. I remember when I was involved with the Way, and yearly they would have a Rock of Ages festival. And I remember I had a Rolex watch that I pawned just so I'd have enough money to go to that festival. But those were really lean days. But God always provided. I'm not saying that we have to do that, but I remember that personally. But God always provided. And recently he's been blessing me with a lot of things, more things than I really need. But I think that's the case with most of us have more things than we need. With the exception of some things that come up, like, the money that the Triggs are going to need, and some other things like that. But God will still supply the need, one way or the other. And sometimes we don't know where it's going to come from. A lot of times it's that way. So I just wanted to say that. Really excellent teaching and reminder. I had some stupid jokes I put in there, like Goldilocks looking at the wolf that had the big eyes because he's never content. So, just my stupid humor, but that's the way the world is. The world is never content. Gee, what big eyes you have. You're always looking for something that doesn't belong to you or that you don't really need. And that's the unrepentant heart. Interesting. Really good teaching.
Yes, Tala. Please go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, I wanted to applaud you as well for the teaching. I feel like that it was pretty in depth, and you covered a lot of territory with a lot of different scriptures that all interconnected really, really well, and extrapolated things that I think we don't normally think about on a regular basis. And so I really appreciate that. It's a great reminder for me. I'm sure that we all have some sort of testimony where God has provided for us. And I remember back when my kids were small, and Richard, I think he was making like $5 an hour, and I was staying at home and watching the kids. And I was worried because we didn't have a lot of money at all. And we had $20 to eat off of in a week. And the Lord provided. I mean, I don't know if you guys remember Safeway, the store's Safeway, and they used to mark stuff down. And so I went to the store with $20 and I was able to feed our family for a week, a family of 4 for a week on $20. To me, I'll never forget that, because it was a miracle. I was like, wow, I couldn't believe it. And I mean, like, we had spaghetti and then we had baked potatoes and just different things. But I mean, we had a meal every night for a week, and for all 4 of us. And so I'm just really grateful for God. And I needed that reminder. I think that I don't know if apprehensive, I get a little nervous, especially in this day and age with the prices that are going up and skyrocketing, and being on somewhat of a limited income. It can be scary. And I always have to remind myself, and I have to just try to take a deep breath, because it'll take me back. It's like sometimes I feel like the carpet gets pulled out from underneath us and I just go, and I have to catch my breath, and I have to, turn towards the Lord, meditate, and remind myself, much as David did on so many occasions, about the goodness of God and his faithfulness. And I'll just remind myself, and I'll say, God, I thank you because you have always been faithful and you have never failed me. And even when I don't know where or what or when, I'm not going to say that there are not times that I do not get anxious. For me to say that would be a lie, and I'm not going to lie. And it's because it can be uncomfortable. And I think that we're very spoiled in this nation, and we live in luxury compared to most. Like, I think what we were talking about, I was watching one of John's, the thing about I was watching one of his videos today about the wineskins and about the cloth and the tearing off the cloth kind of thing. And how expensive clothing was back in the day, and that you were, blessed if you had a couple of pieces of clothing. So whenever the Lord said, what was it? If somebody asked you for your cloak, give him your tunic too. I thought, wow, that's like major. Talk about laying down your life, right? And so, we have so much in clothing. I can't imagine, and I've gone through and I've thought, man, I have thought here in the last year or so, because you have all these minimalists, right? And minimal thinking. And I don't think that's a bad thing, because we have so much. And there's so many people that have greater needs than us, and we can give those things away to other people I can't possibly wear everything that's in my closet. I think, so, anyway, I want to thank you very much, Rudy, for your time and all that you've put into this teaching. Thank you very much for this. It's been really great.
Thank you for sharing. Yes, John.
Well, Starla, I want to hear all the details of that. What all did you get for 20 bucks? You said they used to, so I'm taking it that there's not really quite the availability there used to be. Well, I really appreciated this teaching, and it's just always very convicting to hear about that subject. And the thing that, that really struck me, especially when you were talking about the story of Achan, is, just the the magnitude of the consequences that discontent can bring about. And that, you know, I hadn't really thought about it before, but, you know, discontent and lust for things, whatever that might happen to be, are really tied together. And so, you know, if you have a problem with not being content, not being thankful is another, you know, closely related thing. If you think having an attitude of thankfulness and gratitude is going to bring about contentment. And anyway, it just really, I just was like, really, I don't know. I've read that story many, many times, but just, you know, thinking about it a little more deeply this time about how just that discontent that he had, he screwed up and made a decision that probably was not, you know, something that happened fairly quickly, and he makes this decision to do something that destroyed his life and the life of all of his family. And I don't know, it's very sobering to think about that. That's all I had to say.
Yes. Yes, Hannah.
Yeah, that was so thought-provoking and good, and I think timely for me. Starla mentioned minimalism, and I'm like kind of into minimalism. I watch YouTube videos about it, and I've been trying to declutter our house, which is taking forever. But it's just like that. Just really, nobody on the minimalism videos has talked about that. About like, especially that verse about if we have clothes and food, then we can be content. And also, we came into the world naked, and we're going to leave naked. And that just really puts it in perspective. And also another aha was talking about that discontentment or covetousness comes into our life starting in our eyes, what we see. And that's so true. Like, I've never thought of that before, but it is, especially in this day and age when we see how many advertisements a day, and then there's social media, and like I just can't even do social media because of that type of thing. Like, I just feel like I'm not good enough. Even just like, seeing how other people do their makeup and their hair and that kind of thing. And it just, not just covetousness, but like shame almost, and I think that those two can go hand in hand, or maybe two sides of a coin or something like that. I don't know, but just very thought-provoking and very good, and a good reminder that we need to be thinking about other things and seeking first the kingdom, and that all this stuff is kind of not an illusion, but that's the word that came to mind. It's there, but it's not going to stay there. So everything we own is broken at some point or destroyed. So anyway, thanks, Rudy.
Thank you. Yes, Phyllis.
Yeah, this was just very thought-provoking, Rudy, and with everyone else, what I was thinking about is, how do we start to really teach this to our children, not just telling them, but demonstrating this to them, because this is such a time of just consumerism. I mean, who would have ever thought we would be having hit TV shows about hoarding? And I mean, it's just, it's like, when is enough enough? And when are we thankful? And not just saying it, but to the point it demonstrates it. And that's the reason when you were going over what the fruit of contentment, what it looks like, you know, you can't be discontent and be appreciative at the same time. You choose one or the other. But it's very important that we do start with our kids. I can remember one time we were at a cookout, and the children, different kids, they were eating hamburgers. Well, some would take one bite and throw it in the trash, or, you know, throw it to the side. You know, and Pops is saying, look, something died so you could eat that hamburger, you know, be appreciative. And these sound like just maybe just, but these are everyday things that we need. And not just for them. I need to be aware, as I was trying to say, it's not me telling them. They are watching us. And I need to be very aware. I've got great grands now, but to be able to really seriously demonstrate this, because God does not like that. It leads to too much other stuff. Thanks, Rudy. This was very thought-provoking.
Thank you. Yes, Edgardo.
Thank you, Rudy. Nice subject. I love it. Yeah. I know that one of the keys to have a happy life is to be content, you know, with whatever things that come to you, or whatever things that you receive. You will not be happy really in life if you are not contented with whatever things that you have. We believe that everything in this world is temporary, and only things of God that are eternal, just like what Apostle Paul has said in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 18, when he said that he no longer focuses on the things that can be seen because they are temporal, but his focus is on the thing that is invisible, that cannot be seen because they are eternal. I discovered that if you understand that if you understand God's grace and you know how to live by faith, you can experience contentment in life, because you believe that God knows your situation, just like what you said, you know, in Matthew chapter 6, the text that you have just posted a while back. Before you approach God, God knew already the need that we have. That is why it's very, very important that we continually seek Him first in His righteousness, because He has a promise that when His rulership, His lordship, His kingships will be primary in our life, everything will be added unto us. And again, let me reiterate, it's really one of the keys in a happy life. To be happy in life is to be content. Thank you for the topic, Rudy. Very timely.
Thank you, Edgardo.
Good job. Thank you.
Yes, I mean, how you explain, you know, we are looking for the eternal things. And that should be our focus, you know. While things and possessions, they are temporal. Should I, let me stop the recording. Thank you everyone for listening. And if you want to join us, please visit the website, Allegiance to the King, and send us an email. Thank you and have a good day.